Logging in for service. We're working on this little garage. But, you know, I gotta play some podcasts in the background. Keep you fools abused. Ah. We're going back to the classics.
Me at jjkasabian@gmail.com. There's new.
Hit him up. Hit him up.
It's stuck in the fridges.
Walking's off. And they charge each other. England v France. Dover versus Calais. Greggs versus Bassons. English buses versus French buses.
Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of the Lions Led by Donkeys
Hello.
podcast. I'm Joe.
Nick.
Rich is not with us today. This is our last week episode. Was a fucking train wreck.
Was it? I liked it.
I liked it too, and I feel like that could work for our not regular history episodes. You know?
Yeah.
But not normal ones. I guess today's normal. As normal as any of our shows have ever been.
Are they considered normal?
For us.
Okay.
Normal's relative.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Battle of Agincourt today, which is, I don't think we've talked about knights or anything
I don't think we've
before.
talked about anything that far back.
We talked about the Crusades, kind of.
Yeah.
A fake crusade. But before we get to that, how have you been?
Great.
Yeah, we had the book launch of my first sci-fi novel, Citizen of Earth.
It was amazing. I loved it.
2 nights ago now, 17th.
Oh, yes.
So this will be next week. But anyway, it was really cool. Thank you for everybody who came out. Shout out to the old QAnon guy.
Yes.
That guy was fucking hilarious.
That made my whole event.
You know,
for me.
and the whole QAnon conspiracy theory is super dangerous, and there's been people who have been murdered over it. And I definitely wouldn't have taken it in such good stride as I did if it wasn't a clearly unwell old man. The guy was at least pushing 60 something, and he was definitely there alone.
He was.
So I didn't tell him to go fuck himself. If it was someone more our age and was much more pushy,
Very.
I probably would have told him to go fuck himself.
I'm just glad that. So,
He sat
You did.
down.
the first encounter was great.
He just kind of showed up with a chair and then just sat down between 2 other guests.
I
who were-
sent him your way.
Oh, thank you, you fucking asshole.
It was great because as soon as he brought up Satan and Mars, I was like, I know a guy that you would love to talk to.
Oh, thanks, man.
I thought he'd also buy a book too.
He didn't.
So I was trying to help you out too.
I mean, on the down low, if you're gonna come up to my stall and say whatever the fuck you want, if you pay me $15 and buy a book, I don't give a shit. I'll listen to whatever. He didn't buy my book. He did take up a lot of real estate. So there's 2 people at my table who were talking about the book, asked questions, because we had free cupcakes and shit like that. We were handing out too because we're weird. And he brought a chair with him and then just plopped it down in between those 2 people and just immediately forced himself in the middle of the conversation. It was about a coup against the president and children were going to Mars, which is kind of the plot to Doom.
Yeah.
And he said something else, and that's when I immediately just got up and pretended I had to go to the bathroom. And I went into the bathroom for probably 15 minutes. I just sat on the toilet and checked Twitter for a few minutes. And I came back.
It
I
was
came back.
great.
He had cornered someone against the wall and was telling him all about shit.
All
And he
about
finally
shit.
left. But he was like slurring his words. He was probably pretty drunk, also nuts, and like he was wearing.
That was probably my dad.
It looked like he was wearing glasses that he cleaned with like steel wool. They're just scratched as shit, and they're all cockeyed. Like he looks like someone
Shout
who might
out.
make a fertilizer bomb for funsies.
Shout out
Looks like he
Unabomber.
lives in the area.
Yeah, and we got really drunk and handed out books. It was really fun. So
Can
yeah,
I say that on the stream while I get in
we were
trouble?
talking about the Battle of Agincourt today, which brings us all the way back to the 100 Years' War. One of seemingly countless wars between England and France. This one beginning in 1337. Okay, so if anybody's new or isn't familiar with what we do here, I'm not going to talk about the entire 100 Years' War because, of course, I'm not.
Sounds really long.
Yeah. 100 years even.
Yeah.
100 years
and
even.
So in true donkey fashion, I'm going to yada my way through 99% of it. Just get through this one battle.
Yes.
Like most wars of the day, this is about succession. The King of England had claim to the throne of France, and the French nobility had some obvious problems with being ruled by some limey fucks from across the ocean.
You guys are kind of assholes.
Well, I mean, if you go far enough back in time, all the way up until like World War One, even parts of World War Two, it all goes back to like a whole bunch of inbred royals beefing over turf. Like they're all fucking
Yes.
and
Shout
which,
out
makes for
to
some
inbred
really
royals
crazy trees.
beefing over
Yeah.
turf.
Reunions are weird.
The real
Yeah,
shit.
As
Uncut.
the war
Uncut
raged on, the
gems.
British had a tendency to win most of the battles. At one point, they actually signed a peace treaty in 1396.
That's that Lord of the Rings
France just
shit.
ignored it. France's King Charles
Why?
of the time was so insane that he lost control of the throne and caused infighting between the Dukes of Orleans and Burgundy, which eventually brought England right back into everything. He was so it was King Charles VI, I believe. He was so fucking crazy. Like he thought he was made of glass and he would
That
break.
sounds really familiar.
That guy
Probably learned
rules.
about it
Yeah,
at one point in my
he
life.
was so nuts. He would randomly, like he was known to fly off the handle and randomly assault people and bark at them like dogs. Yeah, he's fucking insane.
I hope he
Sounds
had a
like
trainer
my
just for
wife.
fun.
No, he would just randomly lash out and hit people with sticks to include his own military commanders and wife.
Shout
I
out
brought
wife.
you your ah!
I mean, and the weird part is like I'm not laughing at domestic
Sorry, I
abuse.
thought you were an alien.
Yeah, like you just randomly start screaming at people and attacking them while also being like a recluse and locking himself in his room for fucking weeks at a time.
I smell cinnamon rolls.
Yeah, he's fucking nuts.
Just throwing bases. That's awesome.
And he also thought he was made of glass, so he would walk around in like these big poofy clothes in case like he fell over and
Airbags.
broke. Yeah, ye old airbags.
Ye old.
He was so nuts he couldn't be in control of his own military, so it kind of fucked up France for a really long time.
Oh God, do I really have to draw
so-
a Dodge Ram in
At one
profile?
point, everything was going so crazy that both sides took a nice long break in the middle of war to die of plague, because plague swept through the region.
Yeah, rats had all 5 of the stones.
It was the
Region,
fleas on the rats. It wasn't the rats themselves.
The rats had the stones, though. That's the point.
The rats did the finger snap.
Exactly. And bam, happy Europe.
Which brings us all the way to the year 1415 in the Battle of Agincourt, which is why we're here.
Shout out.
King Henry of England formed an alliance with the Duke of Burgundy, getting the Duke to remain neutral as England stomped through France and just fucks everyone else up. Henry, in turn, give the Duke land and would become the king's vassal. With half
Aw.
of the French conflict out of his way, King Henry kind of prepared for an invasion of Normandy. Like any competent commander, he got to get as many people as he could, and in this case, it's around 12,000 people. It's a decent-sized army for the day.
Yeah.
I mean, logistics being a pain in the ass for any army in 13 and 1400s, armies generally were not very big, especially ones you're deploying away from home.
I always wondered how that worked back then.
Oh, I need to extend that
It's
footage.
kind of like you'd call up, it's kind of feudal stuff to an extent. It's not like you think in like the Dark Ages type feudalism, but the king of France would ask his royalties to give him men, and those dukes and all that, and which we'll go into a little bit, the nobility would show up with their knights. And England kind of worked the same way. There was also a lot of mercenaries, people to fill the gaps. But England had a little bit more streamlined military system than France. France is going to be playing catch up in the next hundreds of years of conflict that they had ahead of them. But yeah, I mean, you just had a call up for the nobility in the region. They'd show up with men, and also in England in particular, they had a system of like levies in place, like ye old conscripts. But they had bows and spears.
Yes.
Um, But even still, getting together 12,000 people, putting them on boats and floating them across the English Channel with
That seems like a pain in the ass.
yeah, absolutely. So it's 12,000 is a decent number. He quickly landed and besieged the city of Harfleur, and he expected a quick victory. Instead, what he got was 6-month-long clusterfuck that left about one half of his army dead from wounds and disease. Because it turns out in the 1400s, when you send a bunch of men to go camping in the woods, it ends with a lot of them just shitting themselves to death.
Yeah, fuck that, dude.
Yeah, disease. I mean, throughout history, disease kills more people than actual combat in all wars, but it was especially prevalent back then. They just camp out and would try to besiege a city, and said all of these illnesses, mostly dysentery, would just sweep through the camps and just fuck everybody up.
You want to drink this mud water with me?
Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
It's not like they had fucking germ theory.
Yeah.
They didn't know it made you sick, except maybe you upset God.
Yeah. Oh, God's really pissed off at me. I've been on the shitter for about 3 hours.
Yeah, and I've had dysentery, which I've probably brought up a dozen times on the show. It sucks, and that was with medicine. Like, dysentery was not going to kill me in Afghanistan. I had medics and stuff to tend to me. But these guys are just like, yep, I'm still pooping blood.
And I'm in line for food.
Yeah, about 10 feet away from one another.
Yeah.
King Henry wasn't dumb, and he knew he could not continue his campaign with half his men already out of the equation, you know. So he decided to withdraw to the English-held city of Calais. The problem being, of course, that in the 6 months that Henry's trapped in a siege, it gave France a hell of a long time to get their shit together, muster their armies, put commanders in place, march toward the threat.
Is that enough time?
Oh yeah, I mean, they're on home turf.
Okay.
It's not like they have to, say, go across the English Channel.
Right.
They're next door.
I don't know.
Which brings us to the Constable of France, Charles d'Albret. He massed together around 36,000 men under his banner, which, big fucking army.
Holy fuck.
Yeah, like
awesome.
I said, it helped. There's virtually no logistics involved because they're in France. They marched out and blocked Henry's path to safety to Calais, where he was going. Knowing he would have no choice but to buckle down and fight a far greater force, Henry brought his small army into a natural choke point. Henry was smart enough to know that Charles had enough people under his command to just swamp through his forces and overrun them immediately, or surround them. So he positioned his army in between two thickets of a very, very thick forest,
Right.
which you can't set up formations. Knights can't maneuver very well through it. A lot of it's cavalry. So, I mean, a forest might as well have been a wall. They're not going to march through it. The land that Henry decided to form up was on a freshly plowed field.
Ooh.
Nothing special about that quite yet, but it'll end up becoming the most effective weapon of the entire battle.
So, from my understanding, I know that from this could be off. I know I was told that the numbers were probably they're still debatable.
Yeah, like most things this old,
Yeah.
numbers are really hit and miss. The general agreed upon consensus numbers that the French brought around 30,000 people.
That's shit.
Yeah, and the British had 6 to 7,000.
Okay.
Because they and most of them were badly sick, like diseased and just shitting their armor. So I mean, it's debatable, but what isn't debatable is what happened.
Right.
Because firsthand accounts vary really, really greatly. It's like whenever you read firsthand accounts of like the Roman Empire, and they're like, oh God, they're talking about wolf gods and stuff. This isn't real. You just have to compile a whole bunch of different resources together. Hopefully, someone smarter than you has already figured out like the middle ground here,
Right.
which is how I live my life. I have not produced a single bit of independent research on my own. It's always been compiled shit of other people, which is pretty much how history works.
Right.
But yeah, everything is debatable. Just like another person in this war, Joan of Arc. Not at this battle, but in the 100 Years' War. Pretty much everything she ever did is debatable. But it's all pretty much, there's a certain amount of it that's generally considered true.
Right. I just wanted to figure out what I guess, well, as you said, everybody agreed on a number, basically.
Generally agreeable consensus is around 30,000 French, less than 10,000 British. Now, once he settled down and began to prepare his positions, Henry had his army drive stakes into the ground, which is, a proven measure to ward off cavalry attacks. Which brings us to Henry's army on that fateful day. When most people think about medieval armies, you probably think of legions of knights on horseback or something around that, right? I mean, that's what I would figure. My speciality is not medieval warfare,
Right.
other than the video game, which is awesome.
I loved it.
Yeah. Well, Henry was sorely lacking in both of those things. He did have around 1,500 men at arms, which is what they're called. How many of them were actually knights is not known, because while all knights were technically men at arms, not all men at arms were knights. Knights were nobility.
Okay.
So not all of them were nobles, which means some of their equipment wasn't as good, because you had to pay for your own shit back then.
Right.
These were heavily armored and armed men, but a lot of Henry's horses, the things that these men at arms would be mounted on normally, had died from disease at the siege, or had starved to death, been eaten, things like that.
Ooh, horse steak.
I've eaten
I've never
horse
had
before.
horse before.
It's pretty common in most places in Western Europe.
Yeah.
I remember there was a huge problem, mostly France, but there was a huge uproar in England quite a few years ago. They found out like a lot of their meat had horse in it.
Is horse good?
It's not bad. I mean, there's no discernible difference in my opinion.
Okay.
And I've eaten a lot of weird shit.
I believe it.
Some
of the shit I've heard is
I wouldn't go out of my way to order a horse steak, but like I'll eat anything once. Like I've eaten goat brains, wouldn't do it again. But I've checked the block and I've moved on.
Yeah. Live your life.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The men at arms and the knights, which I'll call men at arms for the most part, because the vast majority of them were not nobility. They were the smallest part of Henry's army. The other 5,000 or so were archers.
Wow.
But they were the famed English longbowmen, to be more accurate.
Ooh. Those guys got range in the game too.
Yeah,
They got really good range.
So
You want to bring 5,000 of them out.
no, I would not. That would not
That's
work in
terrible.
medieval Total War ever. While archers were thought of as the lowest of the low, when it came to honor on the medieval battlefield, the English longbowmen would end up becoming something of like a ye old weapon of mass destruction. Now, as a lot of things throughout history, their impact has been wildly misstated in a lot of cases. This is not one of them. The Battle of Agincourt would be like the rising sun of their existence. The French would eventually learn how to counter them, but they hadn't quite figured it out, and they hadn't fought so many of them at once before. And everything that Henry did was to put the longbowman in a beneficiary position because he's not fucking stupid.
Played into himself.
And he
Right.
realized this is all he's got.
Smart.
So a little about the longbow for people who are not archery aficionados. I know I'm certainly not one. I've never fired a bow in my life. But the longbowman stood a full fucking 6 feet tall, which is 3 inches shorter than me.
That's an inch shorter than me.
Yeah.
That's fucking tall.
And had a draw weight, or for people who are not aware, a draw weight is the amount of weight you had to apply to pull the string back with one hand. It was 110 pounds. Some claiming that they had draw weights of 185 pounds. So that's a fucking...
These guys got lats.
Think of how big
Holy
this
shit.
dude's arm
That's
is.
awesome.
Just a one arm.
Yeah, just one arm.
And I'm not
The
even
other
fucking
arm,
lying
not-
about
yeah.
that. They actually have archaeological evidence that it warped their bodies. Trying to fire these things as quickly and as accurately as possible is a lifetime worth of training. Archers would begin when they were kids, and they would graduate to larger and more powerful bows as they aged and got stronger. The English archers trained for so hard for so long, their bodies warped and changed from all the tension. Experts can actually pick out an archer's skeleton from anyone else's because of the deformities that their training would cause. The left arm would grow huge, and the wrist, arms, and shoulders would develop painful bone spurs over time. The fingers on the right hand would eventually be limited to only the movement required to fire an arrow. And the VA said that is not service connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, these guys are just cripples that effectively operated a cannon correctly.
That's all they could do.
It's like
That's-
It's like Warhammer 40K shit with like all like, oh yeah, we put this guy's soul in this machine over here. He's in constant pain, but he's serving the king.
He's a total badass
Yeah.
with that arrow.
What's that you said, Bill? Kill me. Long live the Emperor, sir.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Bill's having a good time.
The bow was so powerful that at certain ranges it could punch straight through plate armor, like the same plate armor knights would be wearing.
You know
That was somewhat rare and required the knight to be dangerously close. But
at that point, I'd use it as a bat.
I mean,
6 feet.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like the knight's gonna throw his goddamn sword at you. He's not moving very fast.
No, he's not. I'll trip him.
But anything below a fully armored knight was sure to be eaten alive by a cloud of arrows that a unit of longbowmen could put out. Another thing is, these suits of armor that the normal everyday knights wore were not these super hulking tank ones that people are familiar with. There's a lot of gaps in the armor, eye slits, joints, so they can move their arms and legs.
Mobility.
Yeah, those are the places the arrows would find.
Oh, that's
Because
always the worst.
When you fire
Don't you hate that shit?
5,000
Yeah.
fucking arrows into the air, they're gonna find everything. Now, Charles's French army could not be more different. Outnumbering Henry by tens of thousands were an army of men-at-arms and knights, including thousands of heavily armored cavalry. The French thought so little of the English archers that they discounted them entirely, saying that there was 10 French nobles against 1, because the only noble in Henry's army was Henry.
Ooh.
The problem with having an army full of nobles and knights, though, is that they could not be controlled. All of the nobles demanded that Charles allow them to be part of the vanguard, or also known as the first unit to cross the field of battle. Because, here's the kicker here, the Constable of France was not a noble, meaning he technically outranked every noble who showed up, but he was not nobility, so they just fucking ignored him.
What's the point?
Now, he was supposed to be in command of the army, and the nobles were supposed to listen to him as the Constable of France. But as they got
He
into,
doesn't have a title. They're just like, I can blow it off.
he was, I did not look this up, but he was probably one of the highest ranking commoners or lower level nobility in the entire country. Because he was supposed to command France's armies in the lieu of the king, who was, remember, bug fucking sane.
Right. In
Uh,
his room, fucking his room up.
yeah, just
for no
hitting,
reason.
hitting things with a fucking stick.
Yeah.
And he told them no. He tried to tell them no, because all these nobles, which are technically his chain of command, all wanted to be part of the first wave because they thought they were going to steamroll over this tiny British army.
Whoever wants to be a part of the first wave?
It's 36,005.
Ew.
They all ignored him. This had a lot to do with normal honor of battle type shit, but also because there's a lot of money to be made in ransoming off captured soldiers back to their family, and they didn't want to miss out on any of that sweet cash, which is how the POW prisoner exchange system generally worked back then. Commoners would be kind of slaughtered because you were worthless,
Right.
and the men-at-arms and the nobles, they were thought of that, well, you have to have a little cash laying around, so we're going to sell you back to your family.
I would not hold my breath if they did that with my family.
No, I would
I
have definitely been stabbed
yeah.
immediately.
I would look at him and go, don't even try, man.
I don't know what the Detroit of England is, but like, where are you from? Like, Liverpool. Like, fucking stab him.
Yeah. Put him in the pile.
Yeah. Put him in the death pile. But the French weren't stupid, even if they were bloodthirsty. They knew they had the English cornered, blocking their only route to a friendly city, so they sat back and waited. It was kind of like an open air siege. They knew they weren't going anywhere, and they also knew they were short of supplies. In the meantime, it began pissing down rain, turning their
That's the worst.
turning their chosen battlefield of freshly